Now you have to understand, I went to the hospital previous to this, and they had told me you are going to have surgery on your back, and you're going to be on drugs for most of the rest of your life for this pain. They told me that. 90 days after I started doing what Guru Prem told me to do, my back pain went away. No drugs, no surgery. I've never looked back. That was 21 years ago.
Hello, everybody. It's Christine Marie Mason, your host for the Rose Woman podcast on love and liberation. And every week we try to bring something forth that will help create a little bit more freedom or joy or pleasure in our embodiment and our mind, body, and spirit. And this week we're talking about addiction. And we're not just talking about drug addictions or food addictions or other things like that, but addiction as a whole. Like, how does it arise, and how do we bring a solution to it that goes beyond abstinence, like the discipline kind of forcing yourself to stop, to a place that's much more inviting of an inner joy, an inner bliss, an inner self-contact, where you just feel good, unaided, being in your body, being alive. Well, today's guest, Tommy Rosen, has been a pioneer in shifting the frame around addiction. He, in this episode, talks a lot about his personal experience and his journey through phase one of, being a substance user and addicted to all kinds of other things, through phase two of abstinence, and then into phase three of true recovery, and then the last 20 years pioneering this method and sharing these methods with people around the world. And now he's got, obviously, a book, and he's got 40 plus groups that meet weekly to support each other in making those same kind of changes to feel that freedom. And now it's being translated into Spanish and it's spreading around the world. So, I met Tommy at the International Yoga Festival in Rishikesh, and what I want to say about him is that he walks the walk. He talks the talk, he walks the walk, he carries himself with tremendous integrity and joy, and as he travels around teaching, he's moving with his wife, Kia Miller, who's also an amazing teacher in the Kundalini Yoga methods, probably one of the top teachers in that methodology in the United States. And that together they form this powerhouse transformative team. Tommy's story today begins with his upbringing in New York. And he's going to lead you through a little bit of his narrative. And I was so blown away by all the gems he dropped along the way. So if you are struggling a little bit with either an addiction or the stopping of certain behaviors because you've come to rely on them to feel good, feel like a baseline fineness, then this should be an interesting episode for you. If you are sober, but you're still sort of tense, you'll find some hot tips in here. And if there's someone in your life that you care about, maybe forward this episode to them so that they can start thinking about the possibility of a different kind of recovery from addiction and real true joy and long-lasting freedom. And I just want to make a note, because I know that we've covered psychedelics in this show a few times. I've had an MDMA episode, an Iboga episode. I think there's one coming up on ayahuasca. But I want to be clear that I believe the right use of those medicines and substances is as a breakthrough, as a way to sort of give you a moment of therapeutic access to something you otherwise wouldn't touch, a communion of sorts. And it's a pointer, but it's not a replacement for doing the work to self-source that access to joy, unity, consciousness, etc. I think they're great tools, but that the ultimate goal is to be able to jump in and out of unity awareness at will. And that can be through drumming and breath work and music and sensuality, sexuality, even time in nature. So I just want to say that so that any perceived hypocrisy slides away if you're a regular listener. Okay, so I start by asking Tommy about how he grew up and what set him up for this life in both addictive behaviors and in creating a recovery modality that can serve the world.
I grew up in New York City in the 1970s and early 80s. I sometimes tell people, for historical context, there's no way for me to describe to you how different New York City was in the 1970s to how it is now. And the world, of course, has changed so much. But I grew up in a wonderful family that had a lot of really big emotional challenges, that had a lot of history behind it, a lot of pain and trauma behind it. And so when I showed up in the world, I was coming into an environment where there was a lot of tension, an underlying feeling that something was wrong, although in a way, nobody knew exactly what it was that had gone wrong. Something had gone wrong, but nobody sort of knew how to deal with it or point to it. And there was certainly a feeling of, for me as a child, I had big energy and I still continue to have big energy. As a child, I just woke up on the right side of bed, always excited to be here, always excited to be alive. And my way of dealing with the environment where it felt like something was off was movement, hyperactivity. Food would be for sure my first addiction. So sugar addiction would be the great gateway addiction for me to other addictions. And so I tell people that my childhood was essentially bouncing off one wall to the next as a hyperactive, athletic kid who never ever sat still, couldn't, and who had only two speeds. Either I was 150 miles per hour going, or I was sick. And it was only sickness, headaches, migraine headaches, bronchitis, strep throat. These are the sicknesses of my childhood that plagued me through my whole childhood. And until I had a sickness, I just couldn't stop. Sickness was the only thing that finally like settled me down.
Already echoing with this idea of some vague, unnamed wrongness. Like that's a very, I think, a common experience when something's not articulated or surfaced in a family system or in a culture, that it's just sitting there. It's almost like a presence.
That's so well put. And it's exactly like a presence, like an entity, another member of the family that has no name and nobody really understands. And, through a lot of learning, discussion, education, revisiting, communication with parents and aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers and sisters, all this, I come to understand that a part of what I was feeling and a part of what was there really had to do with unresolved trauma, unresolved pain, which I feel, in a sense, and not wrongly so, but I feel that that pain and that unresolved trauma gets passed on and becomes like an inheritance. As much as I inherited brown eyes from my mom or dad, or mom and dad, I also inherited a certain amount of their unfinished business.
Yeah. And that's like that ghost pain is kind of living in the system. And here you come in as a little kid and you're like, I got to keep running, or that ghost pain's going to catch up with me. It seems so logical. And then this is also something that's resonant, this piece of like, I'm going to go so hard and override my body's signals and not tune in, not feel. I'm going to refuse to feel until the body takes over and shuts me down.
That's exactly right. And that's how it was for me.
Wow.
And I think, as a child, you can't voice things the way that we are voicing things to each other now.
Right.
As a child, I'm just like, oh, let's go out and let's play baseball. Let's go out to the park. Let's go back. Let's run from one room to the next. Let's run to the kitchen. Let's run. Let's run everywhere, for God's sakes.
You guys can't see Tommy, but he's, even at this stage of life, he's still like muscular, wiry, high energy person. If you're not picking up on that, it's just toned down because he can sit in one place now, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I love it. I love it. It's true. I've had a training. I've trained myself, and other people train me, and I've become entrained. And over the course of a lifetime, I think that's really helpful for a person to look at themselves and say, okay, I am experiencing challenges in my life, joys in my life, a wide variety of emotions and experiences. Why am I? Why am I in the world the way I am? Why do I come off the way I do to people, both in a very positive and maybe for some people in challenging ways? What makes me show up the way I do in the world? And for me, it comes down to really training. I've been trained to show up this way. And to the extent that that's not authentic for me, I have to work that out. To the extent that that creates problems for me or anybody else, I have to work that out.
So you're working out gradually this distinction between how you came in the world, waking up this way, what was a trauma field that was creating this bouncing off the walls quality, and then how you eventually want to be, like what's natural to your sort of dharmic expression, who you are, and what's learned and unhelpful. And that's the intervention of the training.
Yes, and I think that's the choice of getting to live as a liberated person or being at the mercy of subconscious programming and conditioning of society and other people, which isn't authentic to us, but yet which might control a large percentage of our behavior and our choices in life.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go back and pick up the thread. So you're growing up in New York. I don't want to lose that thread and just go back to telling that story a little bit.
I don't know if people are going to be watching this. I'll describe it verbally and also visually for those who might be seeing this. There's a pattern developing in me as a child, and the pattern is anxiety, low grade. It's not anxiety where you're having panic attacks. That's too extreme for what I was experiencing. Low grade anxiety, just a sense, a little bit of a nagging, not at ease in your body, not at ease in your mind, not at ease in the world. And so sort of moving very rapidly from one thing to the next, one place to the next. So my baseline understanding at a body level of myself, emotional level of myself is as anxiety. And again, I can only talk to you about this in retrospect. I couldn't have said this to you as a child, of course. But I know looking back that what I was feeling was anxiety, and that was what I knew of myself. When you have anxiety or depression or rage or sadness or guilt or shame or any of these things, we are programmed as human beings to go out into the world to try to fix that. And so I'm showing you my hands close to my chest, and I'm saying, here in my heart is baseline anxiety. That's the only way I know myself. I reach out, so I'm extending my arms out from my chest. I reach out for something to help me with that anxiety. And let's say I get high. By high, I mean I feel relieved of the anxiety. Then some short time later, I crash back and I return back to my baseline. That's anxiety. Now, what happens is a pattern forms. Anxious, reach out, get high, crash, return to baseline anxiety. Anxious, reach out, get high, crash, return again to baseline anxiety. Building a pattern into the body. What I just did for you right now was I just described to you the entire history of my addictive life. I don't have to tell you about the cannabis, the alcohol, the cocaine, the crack cocaine, the heroin. I don't have to tell you about acting out sexually or in gambling or with cigarettes or any of the other ways that a human being can get caught up with food or relationships or whatever it is. It was always the same pattern. It's always the same mechanism. It's always the same thing. There's something uncomfortable in my core. I'm disconnected from my own state, my natural state of calmness and bliss. I don't have that. I don't have access to it. It's very uncomfortable. I reach out, I get high, I crash, I return to the state from which I left. The tragedy here is that if you only know yourself as anxious, you don't know yourself at all. You are stuck in what I would refer to, my colleague Nikki Myers talks about the disease of the lost self. The disease of the lost self. And it explains so much for me in my experience. I am lost from myself, and it is intolerable. I believe it's intolerable for anybody to be disconnected from their true self. So we go out in the world. When we have the disease of the lost self, where's the one place we're not looking? Inside.
Right underneath that anxiety.
Right underneath. And so what we do is instead, we go out into the world to look for relief, excitement, joy, connection, love. We want to get over the craving. And the craving, when I say the craving, I just mean the itch that we can never scratch. That old feeling of something's wrong. I don't exactly know what it is. I don't have a way to identify it. And it dominates at a very low like a smoldering level. It dominates the internal experience. So you look away from it. And the way we look away is in the external world. And then we begin to enter into addictive relationships with substances, people, places, and things.
So this core, like I'm almost visualizing the same exact gesture that you did, but now starting at the anxiety close to the heart, and that there's a layer inside of there, and that the like nested spheres almost and that there's something underneath the anxiety, but there's no way to really penetrate that shell. And that sort of as I touch that in myself, that's what it feels like.
Yes. And that's what it feels like, by the way, for almost everybody has their version of this. It's not just people who have really run into struggles with substances. We're talking about people who feel they're not living fully, or they feel that they're stuck doing day in and day out something that they don't love to be doing day in and day out. They feel at the mercy of a set of circumstances that seem beyond their control. And so we're talking about the human condition today in 2024 as we record this, that I recognize an incredible amount of suffering coming from this inability to penetrate deeper than the collected agreements of how we're going to live life, which aren't really in authenticity with who we are and what our heartfelt desire is. We've gotten so far away. So I refer to that as an addictive state of being. It doesn't matter if you treat that with drugs, alcohol, food, sex, money, whatever it is. Like, you're not living life if you're not living in authenticity and addressing your heart and your soul's desire. We know that society doesn't champion this process. Still, what we're doing right now is we're speaking to it so that hopefully somebody listening to this can say, you know what? I think I have this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's on the other side of that anxiety? What's on the other side of the challenge or the thing is what we are after. This is what I call recovery. This is real recovery. This is recovery of the true self. It's the only recovery. There is no other recovery. If you're doing drugs and alcohol and you stop doing drugs and alcohol, that's not recovery. That's abstinence. And that's a miracle unto itself. Don't get me wrong, that's a first step. And I don't think people can get anywhere on drugs and alcohol and in addictive relationships with those substances. So that has to be put aside. But if that's the work, and that's the only work, there's an old joke in some 12-step rooms, what do you get if you sober up a horse thief? You get a sober horse thief. Nothing's changed beneath the surface. You're still in the same level of consciousness you were. You're just not using drugs and alcohol. Again, it's a beautiful thing that you've cleaned up your act, but that's not freedom. And you're going to find out very quickly that isn't going to define freedom in your life.
It actually sounds more painful.
Right. So you're in that, what I refer to as the in-between.
I find myself curious about we know what it feels like to be in the anxiety coding. What does self-contact feel like? How do you know you're there?
There's the beginning. At first, it might be uncomfortable. Somebody might be guiding you and say, "Hey, let's stay for a minute. Don't run out of the office. Stick around a second here, and let's just feel, without reacting or doing anything to fix. Let's just feel what anxiety feels like. Let's slow down." They might have you close your eyes if you're comfortable with that. They might have you connect with your breath. Hey, take 3 breaths where you're really feeling the lungs fill and really feeling the lungs empty on the exhale. Let's do that. And in 3,
let's do that.
And in
let's actually do that.
Okay.
If you're out there listening and you're driving your car, you can still breathe, but keep your eyes open.
Yes.
We're going to slow down and we're just going to take 3 big breaths.
So let's take a deep inhale together, slow and long and deep. When you feel the lungs completely full, just pause for half a second and then exhale, also through the nose. Inhale deeply. Feeling the lungs fill, just simply that. And then exhaling, feeling that release through the rib cage, the lungs, letting go of that air, that oxygen, releasing what's no longer needed. And a deep inhale, your deepest inhale today. Pause at the top. Open the mouth, gently sigh it out. And come with the eyes open. I can tell you
So even that moment returned me to myself, to my heart, and to a deeper presence with you, even without having to layer on and anybody who out there who did that with us, have a look. Just have a look inside. What was it like for you just to just take that pause?
So from 0 to 18 years old, at least, I never did that. Never once. Never once in my entire childhood
Mm.
did I ever take 3 deep breaths. Never. Now I ran and felt the experience of being out of breath and having to catch my breath. Sure. But I never sat still to take 3 breaths and just even try to be calm. Now, what happens for a lot of people when they begin to meditate or they begin to breathe is that at first they notice great discomfort because they realize and recognize, I'm thinking so much. Oh my God, my mind never stops. No wonder I don't do this. No wonder I don't sit still and meditate ever or breathe like this, because immediately I start thinking about problem, stress, worry, anxiety, this, that. Oh, I have to do this. I have to do that. The to-do list. Oh my God, I'm going to miss this appointment. Oh, I've got this to do. Oh, my body hurt. Oh, this pain in my side. Oh, my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, it all starts. And it's like a person who's been living in squalor in a very dark home, and starting to meditate is like turning on the light in their home. And the light goes on and it shows the person what they've been living in for however many years they've been living in it. And at first, yes, it's alarming. It's uncomfortable. You're like, wait a minute, I've been living in this mind? No wonder I run everywhere. No wonder I feel anxious. No wonder I get sick a fair amount. No wonder I have digestive tract issues. No wonder I get headaches. And no wonder I can't hold a thought for more than a minute, that I have no ability to concentrate. That's before these even came into the picture, these devices. Now we have device with us 24/7, and you can just simply allow yourself to be distracted, and it's encouraged and celebrated. And we build technology to help you do that more. So all of this is to simply say this: it will be uncomfortable at first to wake up to what you've been dealing with. But the choice is, there is no choice. You have a choice to become avoidant, distracted, unfulfilled, frustrated, perhaps angry, sad, lonely for an entire life. Or you will deal with the disease of the lost self, and you will get to know yourself, and you will start to heal your life from the inside out.
Mm.
That's it.
I so beautiful, such a huge invitation. So when you were making this transition, and we're talking a very long journey now, you moved into some very intense yogic practices. Did that where did the Kundalini component fit in your journey? So how did you move from this addictive, hyperactive to taking your first breath?
The first thing I had to do was to learn about life and about me and about living life as a person who didn't have drugs and alcohol in their life.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first thing I had to do, and that journey began when I was 24, in earnest. So at 24 years old, that journey began, and it would take me approximately 12 years to live enough life to realize that I didn't know how to live life.
So 12 years of abstinence, but without the recovery.
Right? Without the kind of recovery that I'm describing.
Right.
Now, don't get me wrong. It wasn't as if I was suffering all the time, but I certainly wasn't free. And I was living in craving to a great extent for other things, whether that's relationships and sex and all the confusion that goes along with that. Cigarettes, meaning I'm disconnected from my breath. Gambling, meaning I'm disconnected from my own creativity and I have no clarity about money and financial sobriety. Oh God, so many problems, but also so much joy and adventure and excitement, right? I'm sober. I've got a new lease on life. Isn't this great? I'm pursuing lots and lots of things. And ultimately, after 12 years, the demons of my life came home to roost. And it was like, okay, I'm cornered again. I cornered myself with drugs and alcohol. I got out of that corner with a lot of love and help and support. My life got better, and my life got just good enough to the point where I could corner myself again 12 years later behind codependency, behind stress, behind financial struggle and challenges. And I reached a bottom in recovery. Now, I call a bottom a sacred space. Nobody wants to go there. But if you survive it and you learn the lessons of that bottom, you'll look back and you'll say, that was the most sacred space I've ever visited in my life. And that's where I found myself in 2003, when I found the real and true deep practices of yoga. I'd been practicing yoga for many years before that, but not like this. I needed a teacher, I needed a guide, I needed someone to really show me and teach me, and I learned how to heal my body and my mind and my life. And it was slow and painstaking and one day at a time, and also joyful and funny and amazing and absurd and all of it. I'm so grateful and so blessed to have met my teacher, Guru Prem, who set me on a great path of healing and painted for me a vision of recovery where I would actually recover my true self and freedom altogether. And that's the thing that we're talking about now. When I talk about real recovery, that's what we're speaking about. If I never stopped using drugs and alcohol, I could never have experienced that. Never. But in stopping drugs and alcohol, that just put me in a pole position to begin to do the work that was necessary to really heal and to set myself free.
For those of you who don't have Sanskrit in your background, Prem just means love, right?
Guru Prem.
Well, how wonderful that like your teacher's name is literally love.
My teacher's name literally means loving teacher. And he told me that his effort is to try to live up to that name every day.
Oh, I love that's beautiful.
And I told him that he's living up to it with me.
Sometimes there's a moment with a teacher, like going back to the breath. Our mutual friend, Mark Whitwell, he just says your entire yoga is to become aware of the breath and your utter interdependence with all of living creation on each inhale and exhale. That's it. That's the whole yoga.
A small thing.
Just a small thing like that. Notice how God comes in through your nostrils and leaves through your nostrils.
Yeah.
And just be with that for a moment.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Guru Prem, first of all, I want to also point out that there's an echo of the I ran all the time and the only time I would get stopped is if I got sick, in the I was doing all these joyful, fun, exploratory things, but the only way I was going to get stopped is if all these troubles sort of smacked me upside the face. So again, we see how if you're not listening to the subtle signals, that they will get louder and louder and louder until it puts you into what you're calling the sacred space, until you look. And that if you're a person and you're in one of those bottom out sacred spaces right now, there's a hidden gift, if you're willing to mine it.
Unbelievable gift here. And it was Guru Prem who taught me that there are two ways to learn in the world. You can learn through suffering and what he calls the school of hard knocks, or you can learn from the wisdom of other people or scripture. You can learn from someone else's hard knocks. You don't have to always go through the hard knocks yourself, though sometimes, for me at least, that was necessary. Now, I like to believe that I learn from wisdom and that I don't have to put myself through the torture and the hard knocks that I used to learn these lessons. I don't know how many more of these hard knocks I could take in this life. So I'm trying to be super humble and learn from wise counsel.
That's why we're here. That's the whole mission. This is the 145th episode of wise people like you sharing their insights. Okay. So here we are, Guru Prem, the teacher, love teacher of love. You meet and what happens next?
When I met him, without any drama or exaggeration, I was basically crippled in my body. The stress of my life had taken its toll. And I was in excruciating pain across my lower spine, my hips, sort of all around my butt, upper legs. And I was just in so much pain all the time. I woke up with it. I went to bed with it. I went to every kind of healer that you could find. And everyone had sort of their thought about it, but I wasn't healing. When I met Guru Prem, through a very, very unusual set of circumstances, kind of magical and mystical circumstances, brought me to his office. The first thing he said to me was, I know how you're going to die. I'm sitting in front of this man with a beard and a turban on his head, white clothing. And the whole thing is just too weird and too surreal. I'm coming from New York City, very, very like, I can't believe it's come to this kind of thinking in my mind, you know? And I said, okay, Guru Prem, how am I going to die? And he said, you're going to die on an exhale. And I thought about that and I said, yes, the last thing I ever do, I'm going to exhale. And he said, that's right. And you came into this earth on an inhale like everybody else. And now here was what he said. From this moment forth, the more you pay conscious attention to breath will determine the depth of your healing and the length to which you can go in this world. And I thought, it can't be, first of all, I don't know what it means to pay conscious attention to my breath, number one. But I thought, whatever that is, it can't be that simple. No one has ever laid out a teaching for me so simple. And that could not only heal my pain, but would determine the fulfillment, how far I could go in life, is what he was saying. And I will say that in 90 days. Now you have to understand, I went to the hospital previous to this, and they had told me, you are going to have surgery on your back, and you're going to be on drugs for most of the rest of your life for this pain. They told me that. 90 days after I started doing what Guru Prem told me to do, my back pain went away. No drugs, no surgery. I've never looked back. That was 21 years ago. I move freely in my body and in my world. I'm in a 57-year-old frame today. I have to deal with the limitations of this frame, like everybody else does, the limitations of their frame. But I move incredibly well and joyfully through the world. That's because of that man's teachings and because of the power of unlocking prana and Kundalini energy in the body and being able to heal at a deeper level. The doctors that told me I needed surgery, they're not bad people. They help people every day. They're just operating within a mode of understanding that would never be able to fix the problem that I had. And the problem that I had was an addiction to stress, lifelong, living in anxiety, lifelong, having no way to process through the past and challenges other than to keep talking about it and regurgitating it in therapy over and over and over and over again. But no, there was an energetic reality that was living in my body, and it had to be released and it had to be healed. And it's healed through the practice and the principles of yoga, breathwork, and meditation. I did what he told me to do because I was desperate. I had to learn once again through the school of hard knocks, but I did learn. And then once I learned, and he painted this picture of recovery, which was beyond what anybody had ever painted for me, I knew that then I had to teach and to share these teachings with anybody else who, like me, had figured out recovery but hadn't figured out freedom. So that's where we are now, and that's why we talk about what we talk about, Christine, you and me.
Yeah. 20 years later, you're offering people guidance on how to fuel their bodies well, on how to breathe together, how to hold, and more than that, like holding an energetic of loving community to do it together. Like one of the things I appreciate about the way you teach, I find you to sit quite in the background and to center the community and to center the teachings. And that seems to be a very healthy way to bring the information to people so that it can be personalized for them. Do you know what I mean? It's not like it's Tommy's material. It's like it's material that Tommy's offering to you, even though it is your material at some level.
Well, it certainly is not Tommy's material. And that's been another teaching that Guru Prem told me from the very beginning. There's no Tommy Rosen method. There's a Tommy Rosen method for Tommy Rosen, and that's it. But I am uniquely suited to communicate about certain things that I've healed from, and some of those communications can be helpful to another person. Those communications are not mine, but they are coming through me, through my personality and through my experience. That's all. If that makes any sense at all.
It does, but I want to poke at this a little bit, because there is in a lot of the spiritual community, a lot of people with personalized named methods. And you really did choose to call this Recovery 2.0, that particular line of your teaching. You have a lot of other things you're bringing forward, not the Tommy Rosen method. And I think that there's something in that decision that is also a pointer to how we live as channels, or how we connect our body and spirit and our identity and our self-contact, that I just want to poke at a little bit and see what comes out there.
Sure. Well, it's more of an understanding of what's real here. I'll give you an example. I don't have it here in front of me, but I wrote a book. Even that statement doesn't feel accurate to me.
What do you mean? Like somebody else wrote the book through you? Consciousness wrote the book through you?
Okay, here it is. I'll tell you exactly how it happened.
Yay.
I sat down at a computer long enough for thoughts to come into my head, and for me to sit there long enough, still enough, which, as you know, as I've expressed, has been a challenge for me in my life to sit still, even though I've developed the capacity through meditation and yoga. So I sat there long enough for words to come through and for me to type into a computer which clearly I did not make or create, but I also had to go out and buy this computer. Words came enough and long enough that sentences and paragraphs, chapters and ideas, sections started to form. I worked with an editor who helped me to form the sections in a way that we felt was the most effective way to tell a story. So I'd written, 100,000 words, and I put them in the form that I wanted to, and then I worked with an editor to help make things even better. And then I submitted a manuscript to a publisher, Hay House, and they read the manuscript and they were like, "This is good. We like this work. We'd like to put it out. We're going to bring it to another editor within our company first, though." Okay. So that editor put some little minor tweaks and little formatting and some little, hey, what do you think of this concept? I don't like that. I do like that, whatever. And we came up with a final manuscript. Then it went off to the printer, and somebody designed a cover for it. There were colors and words on the cover. I had nothing to do with that. And then I was at home one day and a box arrived, and a box of my books arrived, and I was so excited to see, this co-creation. This is a co-creation, and that's what happened. How can I sit there and claim that that's my book, that I wrote this, that it's mine? The thing I can give myself credit for is sitting still long enough to draw from memory my own personal experience and to write it out in a way that only I could write it out, meaning what occurs to this being known as Tommy Rosen to be able to express himself. I can congratulate myself for sitting still long enough for that to happen. I'll give you another analogy, and then hopefully this knocks this home. I just harvested a whole bunch of peaches off our peach tree. Can I say to you, I made this peach? No, I can't possibly say that. It would be a ridiculous, absurd thing to say. I can say I planted a seed in good soil, in a place where the sun could get to it, where there were lots of nutrients, and I tended it and poured water in it in regular intervals so that seed could reach its fullest bloom. And now I have these peaches. I had nothing to do with it other than creating the conditions for something fruitful to take place. That I can take credit for. That's my action in the world. But the peach itself, I can't take credit for that. The book itself, I can't take credit for that. The work, these words, anything that comes through me, how can I possibly take credit for that? I'm just showing up in the best way I possibly can, compelled in the ways that I am to do, hopefully from my heart, to do the things that I'm doing. Does that make sense? Okay.
It so makes sense that my face hurts from smiling. Okay. Like the muscles on my face
Oh, I
hurt.
like that.
Okay. We do this thing in our house called the supply chain prayer, which is you pick one thing on your plate at dinner. You just pick one thing and you try to say thank you to everyone who is involved in bringing that one pea to your table at that moment. And it extends into infinity. You don't. So, but when I hear you, I get so joyful because I think it's also, by the way, it echoes what David Lynch says in Catching the Big Fish. This is how true creativity happens. You get quiet enough to really listen, and that it is like your ideas are looking for you and you're taking the time to do it. But the acknowledgement of the soup you sit in, of others and everyone bringing their gifts, feels very restful to me. Not alone, which is so much of the anxiety in modern life seems to come from thinking that you're a contained meat suit and you're doing it all alone.
No, not only are we not doing it all alone, but nothing is done alone. Everything is a collaboration. Everything worthwhile is a co-creation with everything else and everybody else. So this is really speaking to that interconnectedness of all things. So this is also why we need to celebrate people when they complete something beautiful.
Yes. Uplift them.
Yes, like they sat still long enough to express a genius that came through them, and they needed a lot of help from a lot of people, and you recognize how hard it is for anyone to complete anything. So what a beautiful thing.
I love the story of your personal journey and this beautiful narrative of how the book was born. But you're taking this out in the world and you're doing this with groups, live and virtual, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as you're extending the gifts of your learning to others, tell me about how these groups work and how community works as a support in people's healing.
It's impossible without community. It just simply doesn't happen. And the emphasis has to be laid down the understanding of that right away, which is why we begin our retreats holding hands in a circle. And I'll say something to people like, you may think you came here for the beauty of this place. You may think you came here to be next to me or to hear something from me. You may think you came here with a friend or whatever your reasons are. And those are all legitimate reasons for coming somewhere. But when you leave here, you will recognize that the reason you came here was because of the power that is in this circle. That's it. You are in a circle of power. It is an unbroken chain of power because you've chosen to be in it. You step in with your life experience, your wisdom, your hard knocks, your failures, your victories, everything. And so does everybody else. And if you think about a circle of people in recovery from addiction, you couldn't find a group of people that were more resilient, who had more life experience, who understood what it means to come back from hardship, who understands what it means to have failed at something and have returned to try again. What circle, for me, what circle would I rather be a part of in the world? Nobody, no thing. Community that is willing to be honest with itself. Community that holds each other up to the standard of honesty. That is the circle that I would choose to be in. That is the power of the unbroken chain. That's Recovery 2.0 to me. And it's not just Recovery 2.0, it's all of recovery, and it's all the circles that have ever formed which led human beings towards the truth. So that's how important community is. Also, I am susceptible and vulnerable to the energy of other people. Consciousness is contagious. Consciousness is contagious. If I put myself around people who are engaged in behaviors that are destructive, that has an effect on me, even now. If I put myself around people who are enlightened masters, who are victories over their mind, who have broken through the limitations of their own conditioning and their own programming, if I put myself in front of teachers, I find myself elevated in a way that I couldn't elevate myself. That we hold a key for each other. That you hold a key for me. I hold a key for you. Potentially, we could do something for each other that elevates both of us, or we can bring each other down. And so this is the power and the importance of understanding community. They say you'll learn everything you need to know about your future by looking at the 5 people you're closest to. The 5 people you spend the most time with in your life. That's going to tell a lot about the outcome of your life. Well, I take that very seriously. And so I try to spend time with people who are really going for the full experience, the full fulfillment of this life, freedom, health and wellness, truthfulness, compassion and kindness, connectedness, joy. And it's not that I avoid the rest of the world, but you know what's funny? The rest of the world isn't attracted to me, and I'm not attracted to them. We don't tend to end up in each other's circles. I don't mean that in some morbid, horrible way. I have so many dear friends and family and close people to me. And I choose to be around them because when I'm around them, good things happen.
I like a couple of things in what you're saying, like this idea. I really hear a deep respect for people's experience, not a pathologizing of what they've gone through. And that is such a shift from like the shame component that most people treat addiction with.
Guru Prem, here's a teaching from Guru Prem. Tommy, if you give energy to the fantasy of your shame, it will take you to places you don't want to go. The fantasy of my shame. So shame isn't even real? No. Yeah, you feel it, but guilt has a place. Guilt will tell you you're out of alignment. Look here, fix this. Pay attention. There's something out of alignment with you. That's why you feel guilty. Shame is taking that to some morbid, pathological level of, I don't belong here. I can't be loved. I can't be healed. I can't ever move forward. If they only knew what I was capable of, they would never love me. This kind of thing is not based in reality. That's all ego. So that's what he was telling me. Very powerful.
I could talk to you all day. You speak so beautifully. I have so many little quotes here. Ugh. Okay. I do want to ask you, on the subject of good company, I want to ask you about your love relationship, your long arc, co-devoted, both yogis love relationship, and what role having the right partner or a partner or your partner has played in the evolution of your soul.
Speaking of high company, my incredible wife, Kia, we spent 24 years of our life together so far. It's one of those things where you're like, okay, I have to concede to my own ego that my life is more than it could have been without her in my life, beyond any shadow of a doubt, in ways I could never express. The things that I've been able to do and experience are so much a function of our relationship and our partnership. It's an empowering thing. So much so that in the challenge of relationship, which all people have, it was worth it for both of us to overcome those challenges and continue to work on being together, despite the hardship of having two egos and two strong wills and all of that, and all the temptations and the difficulties of this world. And I mean that for both her and I. So at a certain point, and there's no right or wrong, but at a certain point, it's a decision that, we review it on a daily basis. We're here by choice. We've chosen to be here consciously. Nobody's keeping us here. We're not here out of obligation. We're here because this is how we've chosen to live our life. And we've chosen to live our life knowing that living our life this way will have joys and challenges to it. And it would be an absolute illusion to think that if I decided to live my life not in this marriage, that somehow that would just present only joys. What a ridiculous old idea that is, which I disproved a long time ago. So, how do you want to live? No one is telling you that you have to live in partnership. Everyone internally likely feels this inner calling to live in truth and in freedom. And you can live in truth and in freedom as a single human being or in partnership with another or with multiple people. It doesn't matter. There's no rule and there's no morality around this. Only ideas offered by society and culture. But when you get past all of that, you start to realize, okay, how do I want to live my life? I'm 57. I'm not a child. I'm not 17. I'm not 27. I'm not even 37 or 47. I'm 57 now. How would I choose to live whatever days I might have left in this life, whether it's one more day or another 57? Who knows? So that's the question that we want people to ask and be able to answer honestly. And the only way you can answer that question honestly is you're going to have to get up above the influences of this society and your family and everybody else's opinion about how you're supposed to be living. And then you're going to have to figure it out for yourself. And it's a rare person who has the ability to do that.
Yeah, I noticed that when you were saying you want to hang out with people who share those aspirational values to joy and freedom and truth, that how do I say this? Like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to kind of hone in on this. Like, sometimes your partner can be an ally in you becoming your highest and best self. And sometimes they don't want you to break free because they're sort of in the loop or the pattern with you of your prior way of being, your prior, like you have some sort of unwritten agreement to stay blocked. And I wonder, as you've been working with so many people over the years, how do they navigate those relational questions when their partner isn't coming along?
The only way to navigate those things is to communicate. And the only way to communicate well is to have the willingness of both, or whoever's involved in that conversation. I believe that one of the possible formats for relationship is to look at relationship, marriage, partnership as a spiritual undertaking. For me, that takes it to a level where, at least for Kia and I, that things become possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to be I hope this doesn't come off as cynical, but this is what I'm noticing. People get married often based upon ideas that have been passed along by culture, family, society at large. They say things like, till death do us part. They make vows that they couldn't possibly hold up to because those vows are not theirs to make. They don't leave a lot of room for themselves to be human and to learn and grow together. And I think so the setup in terms of marriage and the ceremony, the ritual of coming together in partnership with another human being is often, the setup is poor. It's not skillful. I believe that to have a spiritual partnership means that you are going to guard the other person's path, and they're going to guard your path. So that doesn't mean that I'll stay with you as long as it suits me. If you do something and I'm no longer attracted to you, or you're no longer attracted to me, well, we won't be together anymore. I mean, we're not even in that discussion in a spiritual partnership. We're into the spirit part, going deeper than the flesh.
I love this definition of guarding each other's path.
That's not mine. That is coming from the writing of Rainer Maria Rilke, who wrote about this 100 years ago in the most eloquent and unbelievable way. And he said, the highest forms of partnership are where each appoints the other to be the guardian of their solitude. And that's the quote. And that quote has guided our marriage because, look, I'm a man. I was trained to go after women. I was trained by this society that way. And I took it on. I took that on. That's the world I grew up in. And I grew up with I have to use some French here, the most fucked up ideas around sex and connection with women. And I'm trained that way. I was. And I have to, on a daily basis, train myself into something else. It doesn't mean I'm not lustful sometimes. It doesn't mean I'm not interested in other women. You have to understand. All women have to understand. All men have to understand. If you're a human being in flesh and blood, there are going to be times when you're attracted to somebody else. It's extremely rare if that's not the case, or sometimes people just can't be honest with themselves at that level. Does that mean I don't love my wife? Does that mean I'm not supposed to be with my wife? Wanting to have a sexual experience with somebody else? That means that I can't have a partnership with my wife, that our relationship is over? I mean, Christine, you want to get down to the nitty-gritty? This is it, right here. This is one of the big, big, big reasons why people don't end up together. Because they do not know how to navigate their sexual life and their sexual self. And there's guilt and there's shame and there's misunderstanding and there's obligation, and then people do things that they don't want to do, and then they feel resentment after that, and it's on and on and on and on. The spiritual partnership says, I am trying to protect my partner in her journey, and she is trying to protect me in mine. And I have to tell you, that allows us both the space to be human. That allows us both the space to walk a path. It protects us in a world where we need protection, and we remain in love because of it. That's a piece of the puzzle.
Here, I'm going to read a portion of this quote, the Rilke quote, for everyone's benefit. The point of marriage is not to create a quick commonality by tearing down all boundaries. On the contrary, a good marriage is one in which each partner appoints the other to be the guardian of his solitude. And thus they show each other the greatest possible trust. A merging of two people is an impossibility, and where it seems to exist, it is a hemming in, a mutual consent that robs one party or both parties of their fullest freedom and development. But once the realization is accepted that even between the closest people, infinite distances exist, a marvelous living side by side can grow up for them if they succeed in loving the expanse between them, which gives them the possibility of always seeing each other as a whole and before an immense sky. Rainer Maria Rilke for the win. Ah, so beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, the whole sexuality piece is stuff I work with Rosebud a ton in the Tantra stuff. And we spent some time talking about the eye gazing and the willingness to go to the depths of witnessing your partner. And I don't know that we have time to cover that. We're already an hour in, but I think the depth of investigation into relationship, like how far can you go without possession? How far can you go in recognition, alliance, love, but not need to possess, control, or hold them in a fear frame is very potent.
And it requires two people to be willing to do the work of staying present and staying connected and staying honest and trudging into unexplored territory. Because this is really the unexplored territory. Is, the ideas about staying together or not staying together, ideas in our culture which have been given to us about what's right and what's not right, ideas about the concept of a soulmate, pressure that families put upon their kids to get married as soon as possible, and that those are some societies, like for example, Indian society is very much that way. Jewish society, a lot of religious circles are very much that way.
And it's like hypergamy, like it's all about status and other things that aren't even related to the personal relationship.
And I think, and I know that those things cause a lot of pain. And I know that I have experienced so much challenge around this issue in my life that I don't pretend that it's simple. I don't pretend that I have an answer except for me. I don't pretend that there is an answer. Human experience is so varied and so complex. And so it's not about, should I be with one person? Should I be with nobody? Should I be with myself? Should I be with multiple people? On the sexual level, what's right? What's wrong? We all understand, I think we all generally understand that consent is important, that two consenting adults who want to be engaged in some sexual relationship or act, like I'm all for it if there's consent. Beyond that, I don't want to get involved in the right and the wrong of any of these issues, because it can be so misconstrued in our society, and there's so much fear and so much trauma around it that it's almost impossible to have a really open and loving conversation about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're also back to truth and freedom. Can you do it truthfully? And can you do it while feeling free and not constrained? So
love that.
You're on it.
Love that.
Okay, my love, you are amazing. I have so many other questions for you. I would like to encourage everybody who's been as excited by the dialogue, the energy, the richness of this conversation to find Tommy, all the links in the show notes, blah, 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 and see if you can spend some time live. And if you have someone who is struggling with that sort of external validated identity, who's in anxiety, who's in depression, who's using external crutches or aids to help them feel less of that anxiety, to look into this methodology of recovery being the recovery of your own beautiful, perfect, untouchable soul.
Thank you so much, Christine, for your incredible presence and your radiance and your love.
Thank you.
And it was so great to spend time with you this year in Europe.
Yeah.
And I really feel blessed, and I'm so grateful that you invited me into this conversation with you.
And is there anything we missed that you would like to say before we go?
If you're listening to this and you feel like life could be something more than it is for you, listen to that voice, please, and pursue it and go where your heart calls you to go. Follow the crumbs, the breadcrumbs, the little clues that life gives you. And if we can support in any way, just come. We have 40 plus meetings a week now online. So anyone, anywhere, at any time, almost for free, can just come and be in the circle. We also have our podcast, which is called In the Circle with Tommy Rosen, and we drop an episode every Tuesday. So I would love people to know about that, and just come. And I mean, there's no barrier to entry. Just come and be a part of and feel that for a little while and see what comes of it.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much, Tommy.
Thank you, Christine. Love you.
Love you too. I want to thank Tommy for spending time with us today and speaking with us and sharing his wisdom. There are so many takeaways. One could be simply that if you focus on the inhale and the exhale, your life becomes remarkably richer. One is that you might realize that everything is a collaboration and you do nothing alone, and that both takes the pressure off and it sort of makes everything a little bit more of a symphonic joy as you play life with others. You might also find some relief in knowing that you're not alone in sensing this ghost pain or this presence that's sort of a generalized anxiety that fits inside of a family system or a culture that you can't quite name, but you're always running from. You're not alone in that. And that if you're reaching for things outside yourself, man, have you got good company, and that there also really is great company available if you want to do the healing work and touch a different way of being. So find Tommy at Recovery 2.0. All the links are in the show notes. Find his book, join a group, and get to know this wonderful teacher. And know that we believe in the core perfection of every soul, and it's utterly available to you to touch this beauty. So wherever you are, take a big breath and know that you are utterly and completely loved by creation. Please visit us on the web at rosewoman.com for beautiful intimate care and body care products to support you in all the stages of your sexual, sensual, and reproductive life.